today's podcast is going to be, I think, one of the best podcasts I've ever filmed. And as you can see, I'm in a white tee, a little disheveled, in this beautiful new room, which literally explains everything going on current day, to give you guys perspective. So there's a reason I just said, hey, screw it. I'm just going to wear what I'm wearing. I'm not going to put on my beautiful little polo today. I'm going to actually show you what's really happening and show you real time. And so this podcast is going to be talking about how we used fear to overcome a lot, but specifically how we used fear to become a CPA myself, and then also leave my 9 to 5, and also kind of I'll share the current story of my current setup. And there's a lot that goes into this. So I remember specifically getting my CPA. This was I was 23, 24 years old, and I was leaving college, and I remember specifically December 2014 pacing around my girlfriend at the time, Erin, my wife now, her parents' basement, and they had this big bar in the basement. It was beautiful, really cool basement. And I was pacing around, and I was like, she knows when I'm pacing, like it means business. And I was like, I'm done drinking and partying and doing all this childish things I did in college. I'm now becoming an adult. Here's my girlfriend. I'm about to propose to her. She's going to be my fiance within a couple of months. I'm going to start a family with her. She's going to be my wife. We're going to have kids. I'm starting my professional career at Deloitte. That moment was a pivotal moment for me, and it's really what turned me into what I am today. And I always remember that specific moment of how, I can't explain it, but how intentional I was. It was like, I am done with everything I've done to this point, and I am going to go to the next level. This was before the financial freedom journey actually even began, because I was so focused on my CPA. But I didn't have any fear going into that CPA. It was more just intentionality and focus and extreme, just attention to detail. And so after pacing around that basement, I got to work. January 2015, I have an 8-month gap between graduating college and starting Deloitte in September of 2015. 8-month gap. Okay, I can do this. I can knock this stuff out. I start studying 40 hours a week minimum, and I'm in my parents' house. I'm living there for free essentially, which is a blessing. I have no income. I have $2,000 to my name, maybe. I actually asked my wife to borrow money to buy her engagement ring. And it was a very aggressive, studying time. And so I would study basically from the beginning when I woke up, get breakfast, go to study all day long. I would then go to work out at nighttime after an all-day study session. I would basically shower when I got home, go to bed, and do the same thing over and over and over. And we did that every single week for what ended up being a long time. But so this 8-month gap was my goal. I was going to get all 4 tests. For anyone that knows the CPA test, all 4 of these tests done within the 8-month window. That was my intention. That was my goal. That was my focus. I wasn't doing the fast pass classes for anyone that does do the CPA. I was just doing it on my own, studying on my own. And I wasn't following a curriculum. And I remember specifically in January, I went to take my first test. I left. I felt so good. I was like, hey, I studied so hard. I knew every page in the book. I could tell you what word was on page 73 and in paragraph 3. I was in a visual memory, and I literally almost had pictures in my head. I remember specifically, highlights specifically. I knew everything. And that changed when I got the 53 on my first test, and I came down to my basement, or my kitchen in my parents' room, my parents' house, and my dad says, how do you do? And I was stunned. I was like, I just got a 53 on this test. I don't even know what to do. And you have to get a 75 to pass. And I continued to fail a ton. And the doubt started creeping in, to the point where I was working at Deloitte. 8 months passed, and I passed 1 test at that point in time of 4. And I had to, once you pass 1 test, you have to pass the next, I passed in March of 2015, the first one. So the next 18 months, essentially, I think it was till 2016, December 2016, I think it was, maybe it was 2015. I'm trying to get 2016, 12/31/2016 is when I had to pass all the remaining 3. And so now I'm passed into 2014, started my career, 2015 started my career, September started busy season in January of 2016, continued to fail. And I remember specifically my brother-in-law roasted me publicly, humiliation in front of my whole family. And this is, I don't usually I'm pretty confident in myself, but like I was really failing. And the doubt really crept in is, if could I be a CPA? Like, I've never had a hard time passing tests. All my friends are passing. Like, am I going to be a CPA? I was scared, man. I was scared. And my brother-in-law publicly humiliated me at Brookwood Swim Club. And I still remember this to this day. Shout out to you, Ryan, if you ever listen to this. And he was making fun of me, just joking. He probably didn't think much about it, but it really, really stung me. Like, that was one of the most stinging moments ever, because it's my family. I'm a year and a half in. I'm not passing. I really, truly don't know. And here's my family laughing in my face. Man, I talked about that the other day to my wife, and I see all my friends passing, and I was scared, and there was some fear that crept in. Like, for the first time in my life, I was like, could I actually do this? My whole life, I passed the test, got the good grades, was always the star player on the team, never had issues with sports. I was totally fine with that. For the first time, I was really experiencing some adversity. Like, could I do this? Failing a ton of tests. And that was the moment that not only fear led me to passing my CPA, but fear took me to another level of believing in myself. And because I had that fear and that negativity and that all those negative emotions towards the CPA and was able to overcome it, there was nothing more powerful towards my momentum than that alone. And while there was much more significant stuff I faced after the fact, that alone is my memory of getting me to where I'm at today. And that was the moment that really changed my life forever, because it really changed who I was as a person and took me to another level of who I am. And man, I remember just laying up at night like, I just don't know if I can do this, but I'm going to continue to lock in. I'm going to continue to do this. And it was crazy. The end story of this, we get into 2016. We got married in June. And July, don't tell her. We moved into the house in June. And we went on our honeymoon actually in November time. So in early December. And the testing window was December 10th. And so December 10th specifically, we were in Cabo on our honeymoon. And I had 3 tests done at that point in time. And so this is like a year and a half in. And so I'm like emailing the NASBA board, National Association for whatever it's called, NASBA, and I'm like, man, I got to get an extension on this window, because if I don't get this window, the end of the month comes, because there's a 20-day gap until the next testing window comes up, which is January 2017. And so if I don't pass this 4th test within this time frame, I will essentially not get like certified. And I literally, they said, I think military leave, sick, like some like divorce, like some crazy stuff. I just got married. I was like, Aaron, you want to get divorced because I don't qualify? We'll get married right after. But there was like a reason. There was like you couldn't like qualify for the extension, so therefore I knew instantly going into that I was going to take a test like January 2nd of 2017, but it wouldn't qualify. So my first one I passed in March 2015 was going to fall off. So I'd have to restart that 18-month window. And so they did not qualify me. I did lose the first one. I did take the one in January 2nd of 2017, and I did pass. So I passed all 4, but my first one reset, so I wasn't officially a CPA. For everyone that was at Deloitte, Deloitte continued busy season, which was like 70, 80-hour weeks. So the only off time you really have in that time is like Sundays. You work pretty much a full day Saturday as well. And I didn't have a whole lot of time to study. So what I did was luckily the first one that fell off was like, okay, I'm gonna do this. I'm intentional. I've already passed all 4. If I just pass this last one, it's great. I also knew in April the testing format was going to change. I knew I already took this one and passed it, so I wanted to redo that as fast as possible. And so during busy season, which was considered crazy at Deloitte, but you have to be crazy to win, is like you don't study for your CPA. Like you do busy season, you get out, then you study during the summer and spring and stuff. And so I said, okay, every Sunday I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. I'm going to study a chapter. There's going to be 6 chapters. I'm going to study for 6 weeks. On that 7th week, I'm going to take that last test, and that will be in the 18-month window for all 4. And I was pissed because I didn't get that extension based on 2 days, and I decided to do that approach. So every Sunday, after working 70, 80-hour weeks during 6 days, I would wake up and study from 5 a.m. to basically 8 p.m. every night on Sundays. I did that for 6 weeks. I took that last test, and I passed. And my wife was not home. She was actually up in Minnesota for a work trip. And so I woke up at 5 a.m., I was like logging into the portal and I hit refresh and I saw the passing grade and I realized I passed all four and I was like double checking, triple checking, quadruple checking to make sure there was no like errors. And because I haven't seen that in took me 2 years in January 2015 to March, April 2017. And so then I passed and I jumped up and I literally dove on my all wood floor, like Superman dove because I was so excited. I called my wife. It was like 4 a.m. I was the Eastern Standard Time at 5 a.m. She was 4 a.m. Minnesota time. And I called her and I started screaming on the phone. She's like sleeping. She's like, what happened? What happened? I was like, I passed, I passed, I passed. It was incredible hype. And it all happened because of how the fear emotion I actually didn't back away from. I actually leaned into that at a huge rate because I could have easily said, oh man, I don't think it's for me. Maybe I just become an accountant. Maybe I just go into the financial fields. I kind of leave the CPA in the dust, but that's not who I am. And I used that fear to lean in to take it to the next level. And that was a pretty incredible feat to where I remember that today, specifically every detail of that. And I could tell you every detail of every test I took and everything. Like it was an incredible feat. But that's the pivotal point when, let's call my brother-in-law roasting me publicly. A lot of people would shut down. A lot of people go the other way. They would fail a bunch of tests. I think I failed 8 tests total, 9 tests total. And taking, you have to take 4. So at least every single test I failed twice at least. And the embarrassment and the failure of that like led me to having the fear, but led me to the right direction, following that fear into actually passing and accomplishing that. To the point where it's actually there's that right behind me is my CPA designation, as well as my AICPA group designation as well, which is the CPA group organization. And that changed me fundamentally to where this next step was crazy, but this fear took me to the next level as well. And because I always reference back to that CPA time as like that starting point or that jump point, like a lot of times people look at like bad situations as like a bad thing. Every single one of my situations that have been bad per se have turned into like a leaping point for us to go further and overcome a challenge. And I always believe God gives you challenges to give you perspective, to ground you, to tell you the message he's trying to tell you. And the more pain you feel, the more joyous you feel on the other side. And that's why I'm so exuberant about that CPA. And I, obviously hold that certification to this day with my CEDs. I do every continuing education that is. But man, the next stage of the game was even crazier. So I get my CPA. I work at Deloitte. I realize it's not for me. I start to create this thing called Budget Dog. I start to post, I start to do all this content to the point it progresses and I start making income online. And I remember specifically I sold my online ebook, my investing ebook. And it was an incredible outcome. Like I was making like really good money, like right off the bat. The first sale, I think the first month in October of I don't know what it was, 2019, maybe, 2020. I made like $5,000 off this ebook online. I was like, wow, that was a lot. And I was making 96,000 at Deloitte. So, you divide that by 12, it's about $8,000 a month. And I said, well, if I can match this for 12 months or less, or 12 months or more, I can then switch my 9 to 5 to maybe pursue this full time, to take all my time back and then to lean into this even heavier. And I can't believe I was even thinking that at that point in time. I was like, wow, this is actually happening. But I saw people like Chris Johnson, shout out my man on Wealth Squad. And I saw people really doing this, like the Wealth Dad. And those are my 2 mentors to this day, where I saw them really doing this online. They didn't, Sean was working his 9 to 5, but Chris was making crazy money online, helping people online. I was like, man, why can't I do this? If I have the skill set, I could do this. It was awesome to look up to him. And he showed me the way. And he comes in a big way in this at the end of this. But there was a point in time where I said, Aaron, I think I'm going to do this for 12 months straight. And if I'm able to match at or above my 9 to 5 income, which was $8,000 or more a month, through online income, through helping people one-on-one, through online financial products, anything I provide, then I'm going to take this leap of faith. And so I started that journey and I started accomplishing it. And we started checking the month off. And we were getting pretty close. We were month 9, month 10. And Deloitte came to me. And Deloitte said, you have this account called Budget Dog. And there were some people messaging me on Skype that day. Like it must have been getting around the office with some gossip. And they're like, hey, I heard you're a big superstar. I was like, what's going on? I felt that uh-oh feeling in my stomach. And the HR company reached out to me, or HR team reached out to me and said, "What is this budget dog? What are you doing with this?" And I'm like, "Hey, it's just, online Instagram. It doesn't conflict with anything here. It goes nothing against." And they basically called a meeting and said, in short, you have to get rid of this or you have to leave the 9 to 5, like Deloitte. And so we had consistent conversations over the next week to the point that they said some interesting things. And I wasn't at my 12-month plan. It turned into about 10 months, and they called my bluff, and they thought they were going to win that bluff and or win that hand, and they didn't. And I basically told Mike Fox, once he told me he was a budget dog connoisseur, and I remember things. I don't know if it's healthy to hold grudges and to win at all costs after I hear those things, like my brother-in-law or Mike Fox. But when I hear those things, they stick with me, and they do motivate me. Whether that's right or wrong, I don't care. It helps. And Mike Fox said he was a budget dog connoisseur coming off the weekend, and I said, "Thank you, Mike Fox. I will be putting in my 2 weeks, and I appreciate all your guys' time here." I kept it respectful, and I said I would appreciate anything you guys can do and help me on the way out. This was August 8th, I believe, like 2021. And we had $9,000 left, and $9,800, I think it was, left on our mortgage at the time. And that same week, I said, "Okay, Mike Fox, you think that I can't do this? You've just awoken a beast." And I decided to put in my 2 weeks in, quit, and then pay off my mortgage that same week, which I have an infamous picture I share with all the time about. And we quit the 9 to 5. I paid off the mortgage that week. And Chris Johnson, who was my mentor, was having his 30th birthday out in California that following Tuesday. His brother invited me, and I said the 2 days before when I was at my job, "I can't do that. It's on Tuesday." I said, "Juice, hook me up, man. I'm gonna book a ticket, and I'll be there on the yacht." And we celebrated that 30th birthday of Chris Johnson on his yacht out in California. And so it was a wild week, to say the least. And I was feeling a lot of euphoria, a lot of like, wow, can't believe this just happened. And I was making consistent money, but I was going to lose the 9 to 5. Now I was relying on this. And I had a new baby on the way. 3 weeks later, September 4th of 2021. And so I just quit this job. We just paid off our house. We were in this crazy new position. My wife was still working, and it was nuts. And so Logan gets here, and she's, perfectly healthy, but, we sensed some things that were going on with her. And just to say, we were 2 houses removed from when she came, just to say why, to explain more. And we went into this unknown territory of entrepreneurship, which I never knew. And I was so glued to that 2-week paycheck, and I was so glued to Deloitte and all that kind of stuff, to the point where I was like, wow, this is really a big shift. And I was making more money than my 9 to 5, and actually much more than my 9 to 5 at that point in time. And I felt good, but I felt very anxious and very uneasy at the same time, because I was like, even though I'm making more, I feel like it's like a hustle, and like I don't have solid footing underneath me. Is if I just show up and put effort in, I make money and I do well. It was like, I don't get that paycheck anymore. This is unknown territory, and the unknown was extremely scary, and I did have some fear. And it did lead me to going to the next level. So that continued to happen, but I kind of got a little better, a little easier at it. But of course, life continues to happen, and 5 months later, my daughter was diagnosed with Dravet syndrome, which is a 1 in 16,000 syndrome, which was not shocking, but shocking, because we knew something was off, but doctor said she was perfectly healthy. I remember the first scream she had when they gave her a bath at the hospital when she was born. I said, "That's not normal. That scream was not, that's an abnormal scream for a baby." I've been around babies my whole life. And they said, "No, that's perfect." I'm like, "No, that's not normal." And we'd go to family parties. She'd have this like stranger danger at the month of like month 2 months, and like we just knew something was off. Our gut was right, and we weren't being overprotective. It was a significant syndrome. And wow, I just quit my job 5 months ago. And this is life, and this is what really happens. This is probably why I'm a little disheveled right now. No, just kidding. This is 3 or 4 years ago at this point in time. And so that 5-month mark hit, and that fear crept in, man. Like my wife was making money, but now we had a diagnosis, and my wife never had a desire necessarily to stay at home fully. She wanted to be present, obviously, but she wanted to work. She wanted to, have a career. And that changed all of that diagnosis. The first time we went to the hospital, they said, "Oh, there's nothing. Just come back in 24 hours. If anything happens, we'll have a more serious conversation." Sometimes babies have seizures. We're like, "Nope, this is serious." Less than 24 hours later, another seizure, another ER visit, diagnosis. I remember specifically, we got the diagnosis officially in that spring, and we didn't even know what it was. There was a lot of learning curve to happen. The doctors did not explain it fully to the extent it probably should have been explained. And I remember specifically, I was doing some CED out in the porch of our house in Cincinnati, and my wife broke down. And I knew, I knew at that moment she had to stay at home. She had to be out of her job. I also knew I just quit my 9 to 5. Do you know how scary that is? Even with the intention and confidence I did have, and as a leader and provider, I do have naturally in my DNA, that was fear. That was fear all throughout my body. I have to not only get her out of her 9 to 5, I have to be able to provide for her and a special needs situation, which is going to cost us an arm and a leg, which already started costing us hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I was on Todd's podcast, Todd Billion's podcast, which is his real name's Charles Oglesby, but his podcast. And I have a recording of this. And I said in this October of the month after I retired, or the month after I left the 9 to 5 before this all diagnosis came, I said, I will retire my wife in 12 months. I guarantee it. And I said it. I kind of wanted to, but I didn't have any specific timeline. And I did say 12 months, but I was like, oh, I'm gonna put it out there. We'll see what happens. That diagnosis was the biggest fear-driven message I've ever gotten in my life. We're brand new parents. We're learning how to be parents. We just left the 9 to 5, and all of a sudden we were diagnosed with a 1 in 16,000 syndrome that nobody can tell us about. It's a rare syndrome, significant seizures, significant things that come with it developmentally, sensitivity. You can't turn on lights. You can't put her in bath water. You can't, have loud sounds. It's incredibly you'd have to hold her in the sack that you put the kid in, whatever it's called, dad pack, backpack. She wouldn't sleep because Dravet kids have sleep issues. So I'd hold her in a dark room in my right hand for 3 hours straight for sleeping, just so she slept, because if she doesn't sleep, that's another trigger. So when I say insanity, nobody understands this. Not even my parents did. Nobody could relate. Nobody could understand. We were on an island alone. And that was the scariest moment of my life. But that fear led to retiring Aaron within 12 months on the dot and deciding to move across the country for Logan. We then retired Aaron in October of 2022, and I said in October 2021 I was going to retire her, and it was spot on the dot, 363 days. She was able to quit her job. We were headed up to Michigan, and there was a snowstorm, and we were driving up to her job's event. We had Logan in the back of the car. A snowstorm in Michigan, as anyone knows, was crazy. And we were headed up there. They were talking about potentially canceling that event. And I looked at Aaron and I said, you're going to quit your job right now, and we're turning this car around because I'm not getting stuck on this highway with this baby with seizures and a position that's unpredictable. I said, do you agree? She said yes. She wrote her 2 weeks on the way back from Michigan to her boss. We turned the car around. She quit her job. She was officially retired. We already made the conclusion that we were moving to Texas to get Logan the best healthcare possible. At that time, that was a big move, expensive neighborhood, which we had to go for family purposes. And that was a big change in itself. So not only did we just retire Aaron, now it's solely on me, income wise, which by no means was that I'm saying it's only me. It was a team effort. But realistically, income is on me, and I had to take that next step. And so I partnered up with some people behind the scenes, and I said, we need to do this level of business as soon as possible to make this move to Texas happen. And this was October of 2022, and we bought the house in November 2022. We moved in January of 2023. That fear took us to a new level. That fear took us to not only getting the CPA the first time around, but understanding what the unknown and fear felt like, to realize that's another sign that we had to do what we had to do in order to get Logan in the best position possible, which meant my wife quitting her 9 to 5, which meant us moving across the nation to Texas, which meant me bossing up and taking it to another level. Did I feel confident? Did I feel strong in that situation? Not necessarily. Like, the reality is not really. But did I know it had to be done? And did I know there was fear that I was going to use fear as a driving force? Absolutely. So we get to Texas. Now the best story comes. The first 8 months, we were on cloud nine. We moved to Texas, this beautiful neighborhood. Business is doing well. Logan's seizure free for the first time. She had 22 seizures the year before. We were on cloud nine. First seizure happens August 2023. We're like, okay, whatever. This is a big win. Like, we're still at 1 seizure for the year versus 22 the year before. Another seizure the next month, another seizure the next month, and less stability throughout the given day every single day, to where things get really rough. And in 2024, shit hits the fan, to the point that we start searching for outside help of just we moved to Gervais specialist down in Texas. But, we love the doctors here. We love what they've been able to do for us. But a rare syndrome like this needs to be addressed at the root cause, and that's not what we felt was being done. And so while there were band-aids and cover-ups for a lot of this stuff, we needed to search and seek outside help. So we sought a functional neurologist, which led us to a nutritionist. That functional neurologist, in the end of 2024, had us take a blood and urine test for Logan to see where she's at before we headed up there to Iowa for 2 weeks to get her the proper treatment, the therapy. And what came back on that test was shocking, but also explained the last 2024 and the end of 2023 and why she was so off. Gervais syndrome is a complicated thing. There's a lot of, it is a science, to say the least, and we become scientists in this process because we're intentional in finding that solution. But that process and that revelation that we had mold and mycotoxins at a sky-high level, per their exact words, was shocking, but explained a lot. And mycotoxins are neurotoxins, and Logan has a neurological disorder, so that does not match well. And that really, along with the mold, messed her gut up. And we had a new problem on our hands. We were in a neighborhood that was a very highly sought out neighborhood that had 6 houses on the market at the time. And we're up in Iowa, making a pretty big investment, $22,000 investment, to get her the proper health and help that she needed. Only to find out when we were up there, we did not have a house to come back to because it was so infested with mold and mycotoxins in the HVAC, which is a common problem in Texas. This isn't like a water spill type deal. This is a common issue in Texas. And so most, 1 and 2 houses are impacted by this, but more so our situation, because she was so immunocompromised, that it 10x'd the severity. So, my wife, myself, my other daughter had symptoms, had issues, but we probably would have continued living there, probably got proper remediation, probably would have been fine. Not with Logan. But I look at that as a blessing, because that blessing sped up our journey to figure out the proper help. But it was also scary. So not only are we in a position now, we're moving along the ring of financial freedom now to the point we are financially free, but that doesn't make the situation any easier. It does make it easier in many ways, but not in all the ways that you would expect. We have our health wrecked. We need stability. We make this crazy travel up to Iowa, which we don't travel because we can't just do that with Logan's sensitivity on a plane or whatever the case is in her daily routine. And we had an emergency plane landing up in Iowa, which is always a great start. So we get back and we're like, man, we were up there. We're like, we just need to get through this 2 weeks and we need to get back. It was such a stressful 2 weeks. We weren't up there. We can't go back to our house. We got to go back to temporary living. So that was a big deal to even head up to Iowa. And we found out our functional neurologist up there says, you can't move back in the house. That will literally kill your daughter. And so now there's an immense amount of pressure and fear to make this happen, to make this change. And sure, we're financially free, but it's not cheap when you lose a house and nobody's out there to bail you out. No insurance, the builder, you can't just sell a house that has mold and mycotoxins. You got to get remediated. That costs a ton. All in cost for $300,000 to be able to buy a new house with a down payment. Also remediate everything, take care of everything. We lost all of our possessions. Everything was gone. 99% of our stuff, clothes, everything, furniture, everything gone because the mycotoxins were on it. We had to shave our dogs and keep them outside for 30 days because the mycotoxins were on their fur and it would spur up issues with Logan when they were around her. And it was just an insane experience. So we come back to no home. We have nowhere to go. Our special needs child is doing horrendous because the mold and mycotoxins and the instability she now has with no home. And I'm trying to run a business, by the way, in this whole process. And so thank God to my amazing in-laws, we had this help to basically take out and clean out our old house. So what we would do is my parents ended up buying a house down here. There's no actual furniture in it, but there was a place to go with air blow-up mattresses in the meantime, but a big room in the middle of the kitchen and living room that was just like hardwood floors, big ceilings. And so it was just children screaming all day while I was running the business, and Logan being off and me having to, look over and see if she's okay at all times, and her almost having a seizure, or her feeling off, or, getting dizzy, whatever. There's a lot of complications with that. And during that time, every single night, we had to clean out our old house. But of course, we had mold and mycotoxins over there, so we were impacted every time we went over there. We were getting sick and feeling bad. But my wife and I go during the day while she had the kids, and I was trying to clean out stuff, and then she would go at nighttime. And my in-laws were amazing, and they were able to help. They're actually behind me right now in the playroom. My in-laws are over here, and they helped so much. And thank God we had amazing family to support this process. But we kind of kept it together. I think we kept it together until this one specific moment. So we found a house. We offered the house. We did it contingent upon a mold and mycotoxin test. We were waiting on that exact test that same week. And we figured we were fine. We're like, everything's good. We actually ordered our bed to the house, which is funny. I met the homeowner. Shout out to you, Tanner, if you're listening, man. We built a good relationship. But I went over there and I was, ordering stuff there. We were getting ready to move in, and that week there was this known ice storm coming. It was mid-January of 2025. And I was like, man, Logan's doing not the greatest. We had to get her stability. We can't wait to get in this house. And I was like, if anything this week, man, Thursday, I think we figure out the mold and mycotoxin test. And I was like, that's the day the ice storm comes. I was like, man, let's hope it's not hopefully it's a perfect ending here. Ice storm comes. Logan's heart rate spikes to 203 that morning. We have no idea what's going on because that's not a typical thing that happens. She had a metabolic change. She gets rushed to the ER. We're sitting in the ER. We get the mold and mycotoxin report on this new house that we just bought, and it comes back positive. It's a comedy special. It's a Netflix special at this point in time. And we get the news that the house fell through. We can't buy the house. We're sitting there in an ice storm in an ER with an unknown thing that just happened, and we just lost this house, and we don't know where to go. That was the moment of just okay, we have a bigger issue because this problem is bigger in Texas, and we need to figure out what's going on here. It's a very big unknown. Do we rent? Do we build a healthy home from scratch? Are all of these homes impacted in this neighborhood? Our family lives here, so we can't just move out of this neighborhood. We have to, for the limited supply, we have 6 homes available in this neighborhood. We have to figure this out. And all of Q1 of 2025 was just unknown, man. It was scary as hell. We contemplated moving back to Texas or to Northern Kentucky, Cincinnati area. We contemplated moving to freaking Iowa to be closer to the functional neurologist now. Do we really need the health down here in Texas as much as we once did? Could we kind of, travel here? Would we be better be close by the functional neurologist versus the MD? Dude, we contemplated everything. And not to mention, we're out $300,000 or $150,000 at that point in time in cost. And so we decide to take one last shot. And that is why I started this podcast saying I look disheveled, but look at this beautiful house behind me. Just yesterday, this is April 1st when I'm recording this. So if you're listening after, this is April 1st. March 31st to end the quarter one, which is the craziest quarter of my life, in our life. We got a builder buyback transaction completed with the old house. We've officially, through all of that stuff and buying this new house, we got a huge buyback from this old builder, which was just the sale of the house, nothing more. We still lost $150,000 in that process. We finalized this process. We bought this house about a month and a half ago. My wife has set this whole process up, this whole beautiful home up. It looks great, all through pretty much Amazon points through our credit card, which is crazy because we never use them. And we're sitting there, and I feel kind of like completed, but kind of not. So that's why I'm wearing this white tee, just to show you kind of like the reality of like how I'm feeling right now, kind of like portray to you the situation. And we are in a much better spot today as a result. But the day that we got we bought this house, and I want to back up a little bit. We bought this house, and we walked by it every day because it's in our neighborhood. And every day, because of the whole situation with the HVAC, and I was talking to HVAC consultants, and I was like, man, this is going to be a common problem. I guarantee this new house has the same issue. And we'd walk past every day. I was like, that's not really our house. But we bought it. We committed to it upon a mold mycotoxin test. And I remember that day we were sitting there. It was 6 o'clock at nighttime in mid-January. Cold days, unknown, just very doubting everything. There was fear, like I don't know where we're going to go. But we kept pushing through because that fear kept pushing us through. And we just knew it would work out. And that fear, 6 o'clock that night, I remember specifically during dinner, I get a call from the mold and mycotoxin tester. And I go, he's not calling me because it's bad news, is he? And the first thing he says is, you're good, 100% clear. And I literally just like, I had no words. I kind of, there was like this relief emotion that just came out of me. And I looked up I had it on speaker, and I looked at my wife, and we were just like, we stared at each other for like 5 seconds. And we like didn't know what happened to us because it was so crazy what happened over this last quarter. I was like, we have a house. And obviously we had a long way to go with, all the cost and all the steps to get into the house and all that kind of stuff. But that fear drove us to figure it out for our family. And that fear, we could have backed down. We could have, Logan's health could be at risk. We could have been in a worse position. But instead, that fear pushed us through, in our opinion, one of the most beautiful houses in this neighborhood. In our opinion, probably the next step that needed to happen anyway. In our opinion, a 10 times better position. In our opinion, a better position for health. Overall, just way better. And it would never have felt like that. It never did feel like that during the process. The process felt painful, grueling, excruciating, mentally, physically, emotionally. The mold detox that's still going on, the gut detox that's still going on to this day. It all felt horrible. But growing pains, the reason people say that is because when you really grow, when you really go to the next level, you will be going through pain. You're not going to be on a beach sipping margaritas and growing. It's just not going to happen. So part of our growth has been through fear, pushing us through the tough times, using fear as a motivator, a guide. When something scares me, that means I need to go towards that fear versus away from that fear. Because if I go away from it, it's going to continue to surface. And let's go backwards. Let's look at the 3 things. My CPA, if I would have ran away from the CPA, I would not be a CPA, and I would still have that lingering thought. Should I be a CPA? Should I commit to that CPA 10 years later? Let's think about the 9 to 5. If I didn't use the fear to drive me to the next level, I would have still been in my 9 to 5 up in Northern Kentucky with a special needs daughter not having the proper treatment she needs. It would have been a financial concern with our old incomes. But we've been able to build ourselves to financial freedom from that fear. The mold, the mycotoxin story. We used our fear to go to the next level, to get a new house, to get in a new situation. If we ran away from it, my daughter's health would be majorly impacted. Our health would be majorly impacted. We would be in a worse position and we'd be so far behind of where we're at. Instead, each one of those steps became professional certification with the CPA, left the 9 to 5, retired my wife, moved across the country, figured out at a rapid rate about how to solve for the situation we're going through with special needs from a health perspective, and got into a beautiful home in a beautiful neighborhood, in our forever home. I always say forever home, quote unquote, because we've been through so many. And I've said that every single time, but barring any crazy circumstances, we'll be here for a long time. And I use this type of real life scenario to show you guys that just because I'm financially free, just because I have this national bestseller title, just because I have the CPA title, just because of my podcast that's doing exceptionally well, by the way, and just because I run Budget Dog Academy and I have one of the biggest financial brands right now on social media, does not mean this comes easy. It does not mean I'm not human. It does not mean I don't feel fear. But I just use those emotions to use those in the right direction to win at a higher level. And oftentimes the negatives become the positives when you change your mindset, when you use your disadvantages to your advantages. Because I use those disadvantages, the struggling, the fear, the doubt, the special needs, the 9 to 5. I used all those disadvantages I was in to then use it as a catapult to go further. And instead of saying, "Oh, we have a child that's 1 in 16,000 syndrome," we're using that as our advantage. So I don't care where you're from. I don't care what you grew up with. I don't care if you came from nothing. I don't care if you have trauma from some situation when you were a kid. Don't use that as a victim excuse. Don't use that as something to hold you back. You're only hurting yourself. It's not to say you can't address it. It's not to say you shouldn't address it. And it's not to say we should ignore it, but we don't need to draw attention to it because it doesn't help you. Saying that, somebody else is more privileged than you, it just sounds stupid because there's different rings to everything, and people deal with, even the richest trust fund babies in the world deal with mental things that you can't even fathom. Everybody has something going on. Use those downtimes as fear to take you to that next level. And I think when you start to change your mindset around victim or privilege conversation and think about as an opportunity, a challenge, something that he is giving you to get to the next level, you're going to change your whole life. And using fear as a positive emotion, or whether you look at it positive or negative, but you see that as an opportunity, and you see, hey, I need to go towards the fear. That's how you're really going to win. That's how you're really going to grow. And I want everybody to take this and use this to their advantage today, because there's so many people living in fear and stopping them and preventing them from going to the next level, when in fact you have a very good opportunity to go to the next level. If you need help, guys, reach out to me. I'm here for you.
You've been listening to Money on My Mind with your host, Brendan Schlagbaum. If you found value in today's discussion, share it with someone who could benefit from it too. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, so you never miss a money mastery tip. Until next time, stay passionate about your financial journey and keep taking bold steps towards your money goals.